I just want to, today's kind of a little bit different. So it's not going to be a real big sermon based today because we're driving our attention towards our heart offering. And, it's important for us to realize why we do what we do and what we are trying to accomplish. See, I don't know about you, but every person in this room, please, if you'll just afford me a minute, when there's certain terms that are made, they're not emotionally neutral. They evoke something within you. When we say the word mother, that evokes a response within you. When we say the word father, that creates a response within you, whether that be good or bad. There's an emotional response that comes out of you. You ready for this? When we say the word church, there comes a response out of you, whether that be good or whether that be bad. How many in this room can say you've had some good church experiences? How many can say some of you have had some interesting church experiences? Okay, I can go on the interesting side over here because I was, I don't know about you, but, I was raised, in this, you've heard me say this to you before, but I'm going to just kind of say it to you again, that I was raised in the church where it was quite interesting. We used to say things like, if it made you grin, it was sin. Yeah. So, it was, you couldn't do anything, and we had certain things like if we weren't allowed to chew bubble gum when we were growing up as kids, and they're like, you can't chew bubble gum. How many know when you're like young, you want to chew some bubble gum? How many remember bubble gum? Come on, remember they could really blow some bubbles with bubble gum. So they're like, you can't chew bubble gum. I'm like, well, why can't I chew bubble gum? They're like, because how are we supposed to know if you're chewing gum or tobacco? Yeah. I'm like, what? They're like, no, so no bubble gum. I'm like, so you can't tell the difference. No. And by the way, you got to be a witness to the world. So the world doesn't know if you got Copenhagen or whether you got bubble gum. So just don't do any gum at all. I'm like, okay, so they're with the gum, right? There was no gum, right? And then, they had things like, I told you we weren't allowed to hold pop bottles. Remember the Coke bottles used to, maybe I'm aging myself, but when we were kids, used to get the Coke bottles, used to save them, used to take them back to the store and get money for them. I mean, that was a pretty good gig, right? Yeah. So you used to be able to do that. Well, they were like, you can't touch Coke bottles. I'm like, now you can't chew bubble gum and you can't drink a Coke bottle. But well, then I said to the pastor, I'm like, well, why can't I drink a Coke bottle or hold a Coke bottle? They said, well, you can't hold that Coke bottle because that's in the shape of a woman's body. And he was like, if you hold that Coke bottle, you're going to think of girls, right? And I was like 12. I'm like, I want to think of girls, So I was like, I don't have any problem with thinking of a girl, And they're like, no, you can't hold that pop bottle. It's going to make you think of a girl, I said, well, what happens? Am I allowed to hold a liter, right? I thought, am I allowed? So there weren't the leader, so couldn't hold a leader, And then yeah, I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not. This is how I was raised. And I told you about the one about mixed bathing, right? I told you that story, For those of you that don't know, when I was raised in a church, you couldn't mix bathe. And you're like, so I didn't know what that was. So they're like, well, what's mixed bathing? They're like, well, you're not allowed to swim with the opposite sex, right? I'm like, I can't go swimming with the opposite sex? They're like, no. I'm like, well, why? They said, because when girls look at your legs, they're going to lust after your legs, and you don't want to cause any girls to lust after you. Mind you, I'm 12. I'm 13, right? I'm 13 years old. And they're like, no. You can't wear shorts because if girls see you, they're going to want to lust after you, and they're going to want, it just leads people to sin, So I couldn't wear shorts in public, And, like I said before, my wife and I have been married for 36 years. There's not one time in my married life has my wife ever lusted after my legs to this day. Not one day of my life has my wife said to me, your legs do it for me. Not one day of my life. Yeah. It's a true story. It's a true story. I'm saying all that to say this to you, that I attended the church that we're really good at making a point. We're really good at making a point. As a matter of fact, we would tell you everything that you were supposed to be against, everything that you were not for. We were really good at telling you what you weren't supposed to do. And we were ready? We're really incredibly good at making you sin conscious, aware of your sin, almost as if you were afraid of it. Like it was almost like sin had more power over your life than God. Like sin was greater than God's grace. Like sin was greater than God's ability to do something in your life. And it made you more aware of the sin than it did of who God was in you. So we were really good at making a point, but we were really bad at making a difference. We were really bad at making a difference. So I thought to myself over the course of time and having some really bad church experiences, because when I was 16 years old, I stopped attending church for a long time, about 10 years. I refused to go to church because if that's God, right? If that's how God is and if that's who God is, then I'm not going to be that. Somehow we were raised to associate church with God, right? And we weren't able to separate people from God. And sometimes we lump God and church in one big, right? In church, all church is just a vehicle that God uses to help you grow in your faith. To help you grow in your faith. It's a vehicle that God has put together called his body to help you grow in your faith. But I realized in my quest, my journey, that as I began to understand God for myself, I really began to realize that if I could ever have the opportunity in my lifetime to influence people at any given point in my life, my main goal and mission would be to accurately give an incredible depiction of who Jesus really was. Because it was so distorted when I was young that God was very confusing to me. And I had such incredibly bad church experiences that did not allow me to understand God for myself. And I would say to anybody that's in this room, the greatest thing that you could ever realize in your life and the greatest question you will ever have to answer is, who is God to you? Who is God to you? It is the greatest question. You see, what I've come to find out is our life, my life, your life, is not linear. Our life is not linear. It is circular. Because if you see your life as linear, like on a straight line, then you have different events that happen to your life over the course of time. This situation happens, that incident happens to your life. And when you see life as linear, you see the events of your life disconnected. See, but God does not see your life as linear. God sees your life circular. In other words, my life is not made up of episodic, random moments and events in my life. That God starts you here over the course of your life and over time moves you progressively through life. And as you go through certain experiences, good, bad, and painful, right? And you begin to continue on the journey of your faith circularly, you come to this point in your life and you realize that this event was connected to that event, and this event taught me this event. And as painful as that was, I learned God's goodness and faithfulness in this situation. And at the end of my journey, I begin to realize about my life, all things really do work out for the good for those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. And I've learned, and we learn as people. We learned and we know as people that we don't paint with such broad strokes and the things according to our life, that we don't make such blanket statements. That, there are certain times in my life when I would just say things, as blanket statements, that if somebody had something, an issue in their problem, I would say, well, you just need more faith in your life. And how many know faith is sometimes not the issue, that I'm still believing, but I'm still having trouble in my life, right? See, the point being is this, is that God leads you through the journey of what you call your life because he has a desire to get you to a certain point in your life. And what God is doing to us today, God is doing for you today, watch. He is inviting you and this church into his story. His journey. Because your life, your whole life, will be a battle for stories. It'll be a battle for stories. You see, the question you have to be able to answer for yourself is not just who God is, but what will write the story of your life? What will tell the tale of your existence? You see, because everyone in this room, you and I are included, everybody in this room have the option to determine the story of their life. And what God is doing is he's saying to you and I want to invite you into my life-giving story for you and for me. That being said, I think that's important for you to realize because a lot of people don't allow God to write their story. A lot of people allow their hurt, their past. You ready? Their failures. Come on, how have you ever made a decision in your life and you're left holding that decision, but you wish you wouldn't have made that decision? You ever made that one before? Am I the only one in this room that's ever made that decision in your life? Whether that be good or bad, you're like, man, I don't know why I made that decision, but I made that decision. See, that's why it's so important to let God, for you to let God invite you into his story. Why? Because you become a slave to the decisions you make. Whatever decision you make in your life, you end up serving that decision, whether that is good or bad. So what God does is he says, I know in your circular life that there has been pain, there's been heartache. I know there's been challenges. I know there's been good. I know there's been some great things. But he's saying to all of us today, I'm inviting you into my story. The story of your life. And I want to encourage everybody that is in this room today to let go of the story that has been written for your life that is not lined up with the story that God has for you. I want to encourage everybody under the sound of my voice, no matter where you've come from, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter how many times you have done it, no matter how far you have gone, that you think you've gone far past the point of no return, that God is still right here in the middle of your life, saying that he is ready to just invite you into his story. And if you will say yes to that, then your life will change forever. See, Pastor, why are you saying this to us? Why are you saying that to us like this on a heart offering? Because what I want you to understand is that I want you to understand primarily the life of Jesus. You see, in church sometimes we're taught a lot about the death of Jesus, and I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for what his death has done for me. Because had it not been for the death and the sacrifice of his son, of Jesus, we wouldn't be in this building today. Aren't you glad that he chose to die on the cross for you and I in spite of our sin, in spite of who we are? Aren't you glad that he made the decision to give his life so we could find life in him? How many are grateful for that? Is that right? Come on, thank God for his sacrifice. Yeah, pretty powerful. But can I say this to you? I just don't want to see the power of his death, but I also want to understand the power of his life. Because in his death, I am saved. But when I see his life and how he lived it, it motivates and teaches me who I am supposed to be and how I'm supposed to do this life together with him. See, what's important for you to realize this, is that Jesus prayed an incredible prayer in John the 17th chapter, which I think that we have to get a hold of, which I think is so relevant for us today in 2025. Over 2,000 years ago, he is in the moment of decision and whether or not he is going to die on the cross for us or give his life for you and I. He stops in the middle of that and he's praying to God himself, and he's praying over you and I in South Reno, 2025. He prays this prayer, and this is what he says for you and I. I think it's pretty awesome that Jesus prays for us. How many know that's a real big deal? No, that's kind of a reverse, because we always pray to him. But I think it's powerful when we get the revelation that day we weren't praying to him before we ever were born into this world. He was praying for you. That's powerful. And this is what he says. He says, Father, I pray that you would not take them out of this world, but that you would protect them and teach them, watch, how to live. Wow. God, I just don't want to understand your death, but I want to know, how did you live? Why did you live? What did you live for? Because according to John, we all know the scripture. We all hear it in church for so many times, right? But I think it's critical that we understand it, because John 3:16 says something about the life of Jesus. He says this to us in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he did what? His only begotten son, that whosoever should believe in him should not do what? But have what? And here's key for all you church people that think that our whole role is to condemn people. Listen, Here's what Jesus says about that. For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but through the life of Jesus, the world might be saved. Meaning condemnation does not lead to salvation. Condemnation leads you to turn away from God. Right? For God did not send his son. And what this scripture does, it gives you insight to the life of Jesus. Because God sent his son into the world, but he just did not send him into the world. It tells you why he sent him and how he sent him. In other words, the life of Jesus had mission behind it. It had purpose behind it. And in the story that you begin to live out, and the story that God invites you in, his story, not your story, his story. When you begin to say yes to his story, you begin to understand the life of Jesus in a deeper way. And you begin to realize as a person that if Jesus lived his life for a mission, then I must live my life for a mission. And that mission is not just me. Is that okay if we talk like that? That mission is not just surrounded for me. You see, God didn't just send him. He sent him with purpose. He sent them with mission. And Jesus himself lived on mission. He lived a certain way. And can I say this to you? If that's how Jesus lived his life, I implore you, I challenge you, I encourage you to live your life for mission. Why? Because we live in a culture, the American culture. We live in a culture, and it's not our fault. It's the way we live in America that has a tendency to surround itself and make us the apex of what we are, the apex of our own world. And how many know that's a small existence? But when you live for something that is bigger than you, and you live for something that is greater than you, can I say what this does for you? That allows you to take your eyes off of yourself and allows you to see that I'm on this earth for something greater than just me. Let me live for mission outside of myself. And that's how Jesus lived his life. Because if Jesus didn't live his life for something greater than himself, then he had the opportunity when he was praying to say, I choose not to die on this cross. He had that opportunity, but he decided to do it. Why? Because he knew he had to fulfill his purpose on this earth. And if he had a purpose, then our purpose must become his purpose. Is that okay? And here's what we say to you about passion and about potential, about the purpose of your life. Because people sometimes get it confused. See, passion is what you like to do. And people sometimes live their life for passion. I'm passionate about this, and they give their life to what they're passionate about. I get that. And then they also say, I have the potential to do this. I could be doing this with my life. I could be doing that with my life. But the question then becomes, I have a passion, I have the potential, but what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do with my life? That's critical. You see, what I want you to realize today is Jesus is inviting us into his story and inviting us into his mission in this earth. And I always thought about this. That if I had the opportunity in my lifetime, as I said earlier, to reach people, to influence people, that I wanted to make sure that I would lead them and give them a couple things. Number one, I would lead them into an accurate depiction of who God was. That God was not mad, he was not critical, he wasn't judgmental. That he wasn't against you and he was for you. So I wanted to really portray an accurate depiction of who Jesus was. And I also wanted to give people the opportunity to be in a church where we would not just make a point, but we would make a difference in our community. We would make a difference in people's lives. That's why I say to you when we come together that you're in a church where your life matters. You see, you may not think, you may be just randomly coming here. You may just like, it's okay. The music's kind of loud. The pastor's he's a great guy. Whatever your vibe is, right? That might be okay. But here's the deal. We want you to connect because of mission and purpose in Christ. That's it right there. You see, I want us to be invited into his story. That story is his mission. That story is his mission. And very quickly, I'm going to say it to you real quick. See, the mission of Jesus is preeminent. It is prime. It is the reason why we do what we do. It's the reason why we're here. You see, I know that we sometimes think that Jesus is here for us, but can I say this to you? We're really here for him. All things were created for him and by him. All things were created for him and by him. Watch, I'll say it again. All things were created for him and by him. All things were created for him and by him. If I'm created for him and I'm created by him, listen, then outside of him, I can never understand why I am here. Did you hear that? If I'm created for him and I'm created by him, then outside of him, I can never understand why I am here. Is that okay? So the mission of Jesus is up here, right? The mission of Jesus, the way that Jesus accomplishes his mission is by his church. Watch this screen real quick, and we're going to end in just a moment. The church does not have a mission, right? The mission has a church. It's important you understand that. The church does not have a mission. The mission of Jesus has a church. The point of the church is not the church. The point of the church is the mission of Jesus. Is that okay? Why is it important for you to realize that? Because today represents that. Today represents that we want to fulfill the mission of Jesus. We want to fulfill the mission of Jesus. And I'm going to give you the 3 elements of the mission of Jesus. And if you have your Bible, I want you to read this. I don't have time to read it today all in church because it's quite lengthy. But I'm going to give you like a 2-minute aerial view of it. It's found in John the 4th chapter. It's found in John the 4th chapter. John the 4th chapter is the story of the Samaritan woman. Okay, how many remember that story? The Samaritan woman who was at the well. Okay, remember that? And she was at the well at the 6th hour. The 6th hour is noon because in Jewish culture, they break the day up in 12-hour increments. So the 6th hour, she was at the well drawing water at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody draws water at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Please listen to the story. Nobody draws water at 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Why? Because it's the highest point of sun and it's too hot to carry water back. So nobody draws water at 12 o'clock at noon. So the question becomes, why is she drawing water at 12 o'clock at noon? Jesus, who was a Jew, walks up to a Samaritan, who Jews were not supposed to talk to Samaritans because they did not like Samaritans because there's a lot of racial tension and they saw them not as pure people. So they weren't even allowed to interact with them. So here you see a woman at 12 o'clock at the well drawing water, a man, a Jewish man, walking up to a woman, talking to her at noon, who he's not supposed to talk to her, right? So the question becomes, why are you here at noon? Answer. Because there was something in her life that made her feel shameful. Something in her life that did not make her feel worthy, that she was able to draw water in the morning with the other women. Jesus walks up to her and says, "Can I have some water?" Her answer to him is, "Why are you asking me for water? Why is a Jewish man talking to a Samaritan woman? We're not supposed to do this." But listen to what she says. "Why are you asking me for water?" Listen to Jesus' response. Jesus says to her, "If you knew the gift of God who is asking you for water, you would give me water." Not gift of God, not like I'm the gift to women. No, not that kind, right? I know that's how some of us think, right? I am the gift to all woman, right? No, that's not what he was saying. What he was saying, listen, I want you to notice who's standing before you because in me is the gift of God's grace to your life. And if you allow me to invite you into my story, I will have you drink of water of the life of God so you will never thirst again. He invited her into his story. He invited her into his story and she did it. He begins to show her that her life really is not where it could be, not a condemning way. Listen, whenever God calls you, he always calls you higher, not lower. He always calls you to a higher place. He says, "Well, where's your husband?" He says, "Where's your husband?" He says, "I don't have a husband." And Jesus says, you have spoken rightly, because the man you're living with right now is what I believe your fifth one. You're shacking, is what he was saying, right? I mean, he doesn't say the word shack, but he was saying the word shack. No, I'm not talking about the guy who used to play for the Lakers, right? I'm talking about the other kind of shack. Okay, so that's what he's saying, right? That's what he's saying. Okay. And then she begins to understand that she's been invited into his story. He begins to reach out to her, crosses every racial barrier and reaches to her. Crosses every barrier and reaches to her. Because you know why? Because he knows that she lives in a broken world. Please listen to me. He knows that she lives in a broken world. So his objective was to reach her and to see her life restored to what she was designed to be in him. He reached to her so he could restore. Why? How many know that we live in a very broken world? And some of us in this room can attest to that. Some more than others, because sometimes life has broken some of you. Things have broken some of us. People have broken some of us. Church systems have broken some of us. We live in a broken world. And what Jesus does, he invites you into a story. He reaches to you so he can heal you, so you can be restored back into him. So this is what he does to this woman. He reaches to her, restores her, and then he begins to reproduce her in her faith. Because what does she do after she receives the life of Jesus? She goes to her whole village and begins to talk to every person about who Jesus was. She's reached, she's restored, and then she reproduces what Jesus did in her. And that is the mission of Jesus. Here are the three elements of the mission of Jesus right here. It is to reach, it is to restore, and it is to reproduce people in this world. That our goal and our mission as a church is to reach people for Jesus. Our goal is to take people who have been broken by this life and help them be restored in faith and in who Jesus is. And our goal is to help them not only be healed, but help them reproduce so they can be a light to people who need to feel the life and the light of God in their own life. That's why we do what we do. So you want to know what today is? Today is a heart offering. But in that heart offering has nothing to do with money as much as it has to do with purpose. To do with purpose. Now, if this is your first time here at Victory City Church, listen, this is for our home church body. We don't teach, don't want you to feel, don't want you to come here to be pressured for money. That's not why we exist. But we know that we want to reach people for the kingdom of God. We've done Alpha for how many years? 2 years? Am I right? 2 years? 3 years? We've done Alpha for 3 years, and we've already trained 5 churches. 5 churches in Alpha. I think James told you about that. That's pretty phenomenal. That's in 3 years we've done that. We just introduced that program. We have a monthly outreach program that feeds 150 people a month, 150 to 165 homeless people every single month. We do that. We help provide people with clothing. We have people that work in a hospice care system that we help do. We want to give to our community. See, when I was raised in church, we were always the people that always had our hand out. But I thought, what would it look like for us to be in a church where we could be an incredible blessing to our city and be a blessing to our community? And I think that's who we are, and that's what we need to be. So when you stand today and you have prayerfully considered, what is this heart offering about? What is this heart offering for? Our objectives are real simple this year. Our objectives is to be able to provide a better area for our kids. You say, why? Because I think kids matter. No, I'm serious. I think kids matter. Why do they matter? Because our kids in today's world, my grandchildren, are going to have to fight and face off with things that we never had to fight and face off with. I mean, when I was a kid, we were worried about getting cooties. Okay? In today's world, they're being pressured There's peer pressure. There's this pressure. There's social pressure. There's that pressure. And if we don't put faith in their heart, then we don't equip them properly for the world that they are going to be sent into to a future day. It is our responsibility. It is our job as a church to help our youth, and to help our children have faith in their heart so they can be who they're supposed to be in this world. That's our job. Do you hear that? That's our job. Now, that's primarily your job, right? But it's our job to help your job be successful. Good job, Pastor. Good job, Pastor. He's such a good pastor. He's a good pastor. Is that okay? Yeah. So that's part of one of our main objectives. That's what we're going to be giving to it this year. Our other objective is simple, that we want to continue our outreaches to our community. We want to continue blessing our partners. And we want to do that this year in a big way. We want that to grow in our community. You know, I think that we're continuing the partnership, or at least talking about continuing the partnership, Pastor Jackson, with the organization that you're on the board with. What is the name of the organization again? Which is really helping underprivileged people, families that don't have resources of food and items, right? Listen, I was raised in abject poverty. Okay, my mother raised 6 little Hispanic kids by herself. Okay, I was raised in abject poverty. Okay, we didn't have a lot. My mother worked, to get us what we had. We were the kids that always had toys for tots. We were the kids that always had the worst of the worst. And it's not because it's just the way it was. So when we reach out to this community and we help underprivileged families and underprivileged children, not a handout, but a hand up, when we help them, when we give clothing and food and hygiene products and things that they don't have access to me, you're giving to my whole childhood, to people who maybe didn't have a fair shake, but to me, you're helping those people become. That's true. That's why we do what we do. See, I don't want to make a point. I want to make a difference. I don't want to just make a point. I want to make a difference in somebody's life. If you want your life to get better, then participate in somebody's life change. Because if you can do that, your life will change.